Hello friends. In the last video we had coded a very simple program that would print sum of two integers using variables of int data type. In this video we will see more about variables and data types. As we know already, variables are containers for storing data values that can be used for operations such as addition or subtraction. Data types decide what type of information can be stored in the variable, such as whether it can store whole number, fraction, character, and what is the maximum size of the data it can store. Data types are divided into two groups. One is primitive types that are predefined in Java, and second one is non-primitive type that are created by the programmer. Below are some examples of primitive data types for whole numbers. So there are four different types: byte, short, int, and long. So there is a maximum size each can store. So byte stores the smallest number, and long variables can store largest of whole numbers. We'll use these data types in our program. This slide has some more data types. So for fractional, there are float and double primitive data types. Difference between these two is that float can store 6 or 7 decimal digits. Doubles can store much larger decimal digits. So doubles are preferred for accurate calculations. Next one is char data type. So this type of variable stores just a single character. Next one is the boolean, which stores true or false as the value. Next we have an example of non-primitive data type. So string is very commonly used data type, but it is not a primitive. So string contains the text such as hello world. Okay, now let's go to our program and use these data types. Okay, so this is the program that we coded in the last video. So first one we are going to use is byte data type. So like we saw, so variables are like we define the data type first and then give it a name. So let's say we want to call the byte variable as var byte, and we assign a value of, let's say, so the maximum value a byte data type variable can store is 127. So let's do 125, and we can use the sysout statement to print the value. So if I copy this variable name, put it here, run the program, so it prints the value. Now if we increase the value to more than what is allowed for byte, let's say if we do 128, so it shows error that we cannot use byte data type for storing this value. So either change the data type to integer or do a casting. So we'll see the casting in a little while. Just note here that we cannot store more than value 127 in a byte data type. Okay, so next one we have is short data type. So short data type can let's call this variable as var short, and we assign a value of so short variable can store maximum number of 32767. So if we give this value, there is no issue, but if we increase the value to, let's say, 8, we get the similar error. Okay, so we'll put it back as 7. Next one we want to see is int variable. So we give it the name of var int, then we assign, so it's a large number. So for example, I will assign a value of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So these are our numeric data type. Decimal data type we saw were float and double. So float variables are defined as float. Let's call it as var float equal to 1.334 f. So f is used to define the float variables. Similarly, a double variable is defined as let's call it var double equals to some random number. Let's use this. Okay, So these are our variables and we can print the values similar to how we did for the other variables. So it prints the value. So next one is our character data type. So as we know, character stores just one character. So let's call it where character is the name, and we assign a value of, let's say, a t. And then we just print the character here. And then next one we want to see is the boolean. So boolean variable can have value of true or false. So here let's assign it false. So this is our boolean data type. And last one we want to see is the string data type. So this string is not a primitive data type. So let's call it variable string equal to, let's give it a name as okay, and we can print the, let's print this one here first. So we get false here, and we can also do the same thing for the string. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so as you can see that the maximum size what can be stored in the variable depends on the data type of the variable. What type of data can be stored depends on the type of the variable. So all these are primitive data type. So you see they start with a smaller character. String is a non-primitive data type. So next we will see the typecasting. Typecasting is done when we assign a value from one primitive data type to other primitive type. So there are two type of casting: widening casting, which happens automatically, and narrowing casting, which is done manually. So what do we mean by widening? So let's say when we have the variables here, right? So when we move from a data type which is smaller to a larger data type, Java knows that the larger data type can easily accommodate the smaller number, so it automatically does the casting. So for example, let's say we have this byte value here. Instead of assigning it value this one, what we do is we assign a value of var byte. Just for the consistency, I'll give it as a name as byte. Okay. So here what is happening is byte is a smaller variable, and when we transfer the value from byte to short, Java knows that short can easily contain this value, so it does the casting itself. So it is called automatic typecasting. Okay, so if we print the value of var short here, we see the same value. Okay, so this is called automatic casting. We don't have to do anything different. We just assign the value from smaller data type to larger data type. Now if we transfer the value from larger to smaller, say we have this int variable, and instead of, let's say, we comment this out. So what we are going to do now is we are moving the value from integer to short. Integer is a larger data type. Java knows that there's a possibility that if we move the value from int data type to short data type, there may be a truncation. So what it does, it shows error. So Eclipse is providing suggestion here to either change the data type or do a casting. So when we do the casting here, so what it does is when we are moving the value, so whatever value is received in var int will be first casted as short, and then it will be assigned to this variable. So this is called manual casting. There is always a risk of the value getting truncated, so this is not recommended to do the manual casting. So let's say if we want to print this value here, so we know like the integer value was larger one which could not be stored in a short, so the value might get truncated. So what we see is some wrong value here. So casting should be avoided as much as possible in Java. So we have seen automatic casting and manual casting.